Hey everybody, we're here to talk about the Kubernetes Working Group for Multitenancy. How many of you have participated at all in that working group before? Okay, cool. That's probably the right number of people. This is intended to be a beginner's introduction into the work that we're doing. I'm going to go over some of the high-level concepts and then introduce you to some of the work that's going on. But if you're interested in getting a demo of the CRDs that we're working on and more in-depth Q&A, then that's going to be the deep dive that is tomorrow. Cool. So the Multitenancy Working Group was founded in KubeCon North America in 2017. And there was a large show of community interest in the subject and approaches to achieving multi-tenancy. We're a working group that's formed under SIG-Auth, and multi-tenancy and how we achieve multi-tenancy touches many parts of Kubernetes. So SIG nodes, scheduling, security, network, storage, and API machinery. Who are we? I'm one of the chairs. My name's Tasha Drew, and I also work at VMware. I have a co-chair, David Oppenheimer, who's at Google. David's actually stepping down, so we have an open request to see who wants to be our next chair, and that's going to be something that people are putting forward in our next meeting, which is Tuesday, June 4th. We have a broad group of professionals from many different organizations who regularly contribute. I put some of their names up here, but this is really just a subset of all of the people who we engage with all the time. Where can you find us? We have a Slack group. So the Kubernetes community has a community Slack. It's different from the CNCF Slack. So I would really recommend, if you're not already in it, I put the link up there, but just check it out, jump in. And then we have a channel in that Slack that is Working Group Multitenancy. We also have a Google group. If you have engaged with other working groups and SIGs in the Kubernetes community, then you know that joining the Google group is really the best way to quickly engage with the open source community. The mailing list is where all of the meeting notes go out. It's where people will post questions and ideas and links to their KEPs. So join our Google group for sure, and you will then automatically receive Google Calendar invitations to all of our events, including the all-important Zoom link. We have bi-weekly meetings. If you join the Google group, you'll get the invitation to this bi-weekly meeting. They are at Tuesday, 11 a.m. Pacific time. I know that that might not be great for all time zones, and we are open to moving that if we're having an additional time if the community would like to see that. We record all of our meetings. They're posted to YouTube. We have a playlist that you can check out to see every meeting we've had. And we're also on GitHub under Kubernetes SIGs. So I would really recommend checking out our GitHub multi-tenancy page. That's where you will see all of the sample code for our proof of concept CRDs. It's also where you can find, and I wrote the link later in this deck, but it's also where you can find a link to all of the important documentation that we as a working group have been putting together that defines some of the high and low level concepts of multi-tenancy in Kubernetes. So why multi-tenancy, and what do we really mean when we talk about multi-tenancy? So at the end of the day, people, companies, departments, they want to share Kubernetes clusters. They might have multiple users of the same Kubernetes clusters. They might have multiple applications. They might have multiple teams, or they might have multiple customers. So why wouldn't you give everyone their own unique Kubernetes cluster? The answer is reduced cluster sprawl, improved resource utilization. There may be different tools that you're installing on a cluster that you want different teams to be able to share. So we're kind of like trying to explain something, and we do this in our mission statement as well, but we think that there is absolutely a use case for cluster API, federation, ephemeral clusters, spinning them up and down all day. We think that's awesome, but we still think that there is a need for multi-tenancy as well. So we're not saying that those projects aren't awesome and important because we absolutely use and believe in them, but we're also saying multi-tenancy is a crucial thing that a lot of our customers and other users of Kubernetes are asking for. So you can read more about this at our project plan proposal, which is on Google Docs, and we've presented that a couple times, and it has a high-level project plan that I'll briefly go over as well. So for tenancy, One of the things that people say if you are in the multi-tenancy group, and you'll hear this a lot, is nobody agrees on what a tenant is. So I mostly put this slide up to show you that we do agree on what a tenant is. So we have an entire really awesome doc that Envoy, who at Google has put together, called the tenant concept in Kubernetes. But at a high level, what we're saying is a tenant represents a group of Kubernetes users. A tenant has certain accessibility to a group of resources in a Kubernetes cluster. A tenant can manage accessibility of the group of resources for subgroups of users limited by the accessibility granted to the tenant. A tenant can be allocated quota to consume resources in a Kubernetes cluster. A Kubernetes cluster is shared by one or more tenants who are either isolated or not isolated. And in a Kubernetes cluster, a tenant is an entity representing a group of resources with defined accessibility and quota. So you can see what we're doing here is we're really trying to define what is that use case, why do people need multi-tenancy, and then how do we draw a circle around what multi-tenancy is without making it too restrictive in a way that really cuts out a lot of important use cases for people, but also with having a clear enough definition that this really gives us a problem that we as a group and a community can tackle. So this tenancy concept in Kubernetes doc is open for comment. It was presented 2 weeks ago to the community and 2 weeks ago before that, and we're continuing to gather feedback and really iterate on that. So different tenancy models. You'll hear these terms a lot when you engage with the multi-tenancy working group, so I just kind of wanted to get everyone on the same page about what we're talking about. So we have soft multi-tenancy and we have hard multi-tenancy. And really what we're talking about is how isolated we can make the tenants within your Kubernetes cluster. So today we can achieve soft multi-tenancy in Kubernetes. There are some gaps, there's some feature gaps, and there is not an official Kubernetes profile that says if you run this exact profile, then you will get a soft multi-tenant Kubernetes cluster, and it's signed off by Kubernetes, and we all agree this is a soft multi-tenancy cluster. That's all work that this working group wants to address. But what soft multi-tenancy means is it's a model of multi-tenancy in which the users of the shared cluster are somewhat trusted. So you're not saying that I'm going to run something that complete strangers are going to come in and try to escape everything. There is some contract between the runner of the cluster and the users of the cluster that says, maybe I'm an employee, like I have a vested interest in not messing with you too much, and if I do mess with you, it's going to be logged and I'm going to get fired. So we have this idea that people have an incentive to act as a good actor on the system. So tenants don't have access to anything from other tenants, but it would be accessible, for example, to share the API. We don't need a completely dedicated and isolated API or control plane per user. Now, hard multi-tenancy is going one step further, or many steps further, and saying that this is a model of multi-tenancy in which there is zero trust between users of a shared cluster to behave as good actors on the system. And so tenants shouldn't have any access to anything from other tenants except and so this is actually a major point of debate. So here we're saying except for the Kubernetes API, which could be protected but still accessible to allow tenants users to run their own controllers and operators and take other actions on other objects between their namespaces. But there are some people who say that there actually can be zero trust and zero sharing of that API control plane. So that's something that we need to have models for both, most likely. And there has been a really great series of presentations, the first of which was 2 weeks ago at the Multi-Tenancy Working Group, about how one company, Alibaba, has been achieving this by basically having multiple nested control planes. And I would recommend checking that out. And they are gathering feedback and use cases because they want to make this a project that's very useful for a lot of people. Boop. How to get involved. Okay, so GitHub, again, I would definitely encourage everybody to go check out our multi-tenancy project page. We have project boards. One is for this project, the tenant CRD, which is a CRD that we're attempting to automate the creation of tenants using namespaces. So you can check that code out. You can try to advance the project. You can offer feedback, pull requests. and we have some other projects that we're going to work on. We also have a lot of documentation. Like this working group has, over time, really iterated on attempting to define tenancy, soft multi-tenancy, hard multi-tenancy. What do all of these things mean? How do we apply them in the different clusters? So those docs are also open for comment. Some of them have been really ratified by the working group, and some of them are more, very much like in their iteration mode. So check those out. If you check out the project plan that I mentioned earlier, we have some sections where we are gathering use cases, both from an implementation perspective and from a customer story perspective. So if you want, the easiest way to get started is really to review those and then think, is this what my customers and my users are looking for out of multi-tenancy? And if it is, that's awesome. You can just +1 it. And if you have a new user story, we definitely want to gather those so that we're sure that we are continuing to evolve the project in the direction that the community and our customers need. Here I have something also from the project plan, which is going over basically our high-level project plan. So we have these epics, and then we're doing now, next, and future. You can probably tell I'm a product manager because I put this together, and then some of the engineers involved immediately jumped into next and future tasks. But this is basically a way of slicing up what we're looking to do. So first, what we're doing is taking Kubernetes as it is today and defining what a secure cluster means. If you look at a project like Istio, Istio has a page where if you want to run Istio in a multi-tenant manner, you go to the page, you click the docs, and it tells you this is how you set Istio up. Kubernetes doesn't have that. One of the reasons I got involved with this project is because if you run conformance against a cluster that's been really locked down for multi-tenancy, you're not going to pass conformance, and that's a problem. So one of the first things that we're looking at doing is just defining what is a secure cluster using Kubernetes today, and then working with the community to agree that this profile is accepted by the Kubernetes community, and then perhaps introducing conformance tests so that you could pass conformance with a lockdown cluster with this model. So the first thing we want to do is define a secure single tenant cluster, and that's just because if we want to have a profile of a secure cluster, let's start with the easiest use case, which is zero multi-tenancy. And then the next use case is defining a secure soft multi-tenant cluster, and that's again using Kubernetes today without asking for changes from SIG API machinery, et cetera. Once we have both of those definitions, then what we're going to do is we're going to share those with the bug bounty program, and we were asked to do this by some of the leaders. And so if the bug bounty program now has these secure profiles, then they can start running them through all of their testing, and then we can get really fast feedback on what needs to be changed. We'll get peer review from other SIGs, and then we want to investigate using and providing recommended profiles around SecComp and AppArmor. In the future, we'll continue to iterate on all of these and then use what we've learned to feed into feature requests that are going to be more in the guts of Kubernetes and might start to touch things like API machinery and other SIGs. Our other epic is introducing new features and tools to improve support for soft multi-tenancy. And so some of this work is already in progress, and you can check it out on our GitHub, but we are looking at developing a tenancy CRD, a cluster auditing suite that you could just run against your cluster to see, is this correctly configured for multi-tenancy? You can see why having those agreed upon profiles of multi-tenancy are important in order to be able to do this next step, and also introducing monitoring around multi-tenancy. And then we'll continue to iterate on those. And then finally, supporting hard multi-tenancy. Now, this is what a lot of people are super interested in, but what we really need to do is finish these first two epics and figure out what is concretely needed in order to support hard multi-tenancy and feed all of that into requirements, and then kick that off as another project. We have a couple other sessions at KubeCon EU that are being done by the leaders of the working group. We have a deep dive tomorrow at 2:50, and then we have a panel discussion of multi-tenancy and Kubernetes, where we're going to have a bunch of different people from different organizations talking about how multi-tenancy is important to their customers and in their use cases, and also talking about current state, and then also talking about the roadmap going forward. So you can find all of the links that I posted up here on our GitHub page. If you just go to it, you can follow the links to docs and then links.md, and you'll see basically all of our major important multi-tenancy docs. So that is, at a high level, everything I had to go over today. I know a bunch of people joined late, so I can definitely skip to the beginning if there's questions about that. But I just wanted to open it up for any questions I can answer for anybody. Yeah, I guess. No? Okay, yeah. Could you say that again?
Would you advise us to not do hard multi-tenancy clusters now?
I would say that you could definitely try to do hard multi-tenancy clusters right now. The question is how it's going to, you might end up doing things that would make you deviate from the conformance. Yeah, so if you're running a cluster right now, you could maybe change things, but it would be hard. And so like as clarification, like there are absolutely SaaS providers today using Kubernetes underneath and providing different namespaces to different customers, but they're not necessarily providing access to the API. And so that's really the question is like, what is your use case? Exactly. Yeah, they're not providing access to the Kubernetes API to their clients in a hard multi-tenancy use case. How does this work with Active Directory? Active Directory would be your choice for SSO. So it's just the same way it would work with any other LDAP or other configuration. Like you can provide, you can provide your users their user credentials and authenticate them to the cluster, but at the end of the day, you still have the cluster roles that they're able to map to, and then whether or not you want them to be able to access the Kubernetes API. I can't hear you, I'm sorry. I know there was someone who was going to run around with a microphone. Could you hear what he said? Can you?
Are there any ready-made plugins available?
Oh, okay. So one of the things that for Active Directory or just for multi-tenancy? So for Active Directory, I think you can use something like Dex and to connect to Active Directory. Yeah. Dex is DEX if you want to check it out. It's an open source project. Yeah, anything else? Yes?
What's your current best guess on the timeline for next and future?
For next and future? Let's pull it up. Okay, so next is already going. So we have the tenant CRD work has already started. As far as timelines, like it's just really going to depend on how much engagement and traction we get. And so one of the reasons that we introduced GitHub project boards was a lot of people want to get involved, but it's not really clear to them like what could they just jump in on and not be stepping on anybody's toes. So that's why we now have a backlog on the GitHub project boards for people to kind of check out, add their name to, and then start kind of moving it forward. I would say ideally like we could get pretty far before the next KubeCon in San Diego, but as far as like guaranteeing hard multi-tenancy available, like that's going to be like a lot of like coordination between the SIGs and you know potentially you know there's some argument about whether it's even needed, you know, so that's going to be like probably 2+ years out, I would guess. But it really depends like on the demand from the community. Like if the Kubernetes community decided tomorrow like this was their #1 thing and everybody had to have it, then it would happen much faster. Yes. Yeah, Federation is absolutely an ongoing project. It's just not in our working group. So that is something that's being actively worked on. I'm not sure who by off the top of my head, but I mean, yeah, it's something we're all going to need, and it's probably a lot closer in than hard multi-tenancy. Cool. Well, I think, let's see. Yeah, we have 5 minutes left, so if anyone has more questions, definitely ask them. If anyone wants me to go over anything in more depth, I can do that, and otherwise we can take a break and drink coffee. Yeah.
One more for
Okay.
multi-tenancy. What's like the percentage of conformance tests that are not passing? Like, do you have documentation? What we can expect? Right? What things won't?
Yeah, I actually have an entire list of all of the conformance tests a cluster that my team has run won't pass as a result of locking it down for hard multi-tenancy. So it's, it's not an insignificant number, but there are also things that you can do to pass the conformance tests. And I'm not sure if everybody has this context, but the reason it's important to pass the conformance tests for Kubernetes is that you're not allowed to call what you do Kubernetes unless you pass the conformance tests. And that's for a lot of really important reasons, but what we're sort of advocating for is this idea that there should be multiple profiles of conformance tests that the community has agreed upon, so in addition to the sort of one that exists now. But that's all in a public document that I can share with you if you'd like to see it. And I wanted to collect more examples of people's failures of conformance tests to see what patterns there are that evolve. And then some of the SIG-auth leaders have been super receptive to us opening PRs and opening bug reports on the conformance test to say, this is what I was trying to do, and then this wouldn't pass, so that they can be aware of those. Yeah. I thought I saw a question in the back, but maybe it went away. Yeah?
I'd like to talk about some new feature about core down feature with multi-tenancy. So is there any suitable place to discuss about new feature requests?
Yeah, yeah.
Deep dive session is, I'm not sure that where is a suitable place to discuss about.
Yeah. So the question was, if somebody is working on something for multi-tenancy, where's a good place to talk about it? I would say we could definitely talk about it now. We could. The deep dive is intended to be more of a open session where people can kind of put up what they'd like to talk about and do dot voting. And then also we were talking about just inviting everyone who wants to talk about multi-tenancy to meet up at the party too. Because at KubeCon North America, we did an open spaces around multi-tenancy where we basically just did an on-conference style, and that was super popular. So there's always a lot of really interesting things that people want to talk about. Are you on the Alibaba team?
No, I'm just I'm an upstream developer.
Oh, cool.
So that I'd like to talk about the new feature about
Yeah.
core down. So that that was the first time to join KubeCon. So that I'm not sure where is the suitable section.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, so the question was, as a new upstream developer, where's the right place to just engage with people and talk with them? And the bummer is the community day was actually yesterday, all day. They did and that's just something to know about KubeCon is usually the day before KubeCon, they do something that's totally focused on the upstream that's very unconference style. But in the future, definitely join the working group meetings. And then if you ever have something you want to talk about, you can just say to the mailing list, I have this subject I'd like to talk about, and it'll get added to the agenda. So that's a really good way. And then also if the time zones are weird or you just kind of want to write something up and share it, you can just send that to the mailing list as well. Yeah. Cool. Anyone else? Okay. Well, thank you everyone so much for joining. We do have those follow-on sessions if you're interested, and we're all on Twitter and GitHub. So yeah, anytime you want to talk about multi-tenancy, hit us up. Thanks.